The galaxy is old, its empires are powerful, and its wars are endless. Humanity stands. These are the Empyrean Chronicles.
Reaper Fleet. An Empyrean Chronicles original story. The Council Chamber Classified Session. The session had been called without formal notice, which meant there was no record of it. Council War Arbiter Sen Orath stood at the head of the inner table and looked at the 11 faces assembled around it. Senior members only. No aides, no transcription systems active. The chamber's walls were lined with the flags of 43 member civilizations, arranged in the specific order that encoded, for those who knew how to read it, the exact hierarchy of power that the Council's public language was designed to obscure. He had called this meeting because the proposal on the table was not the kind that went into the official record before approval. After approval, the record could be shaped into whatever framing was most useful. Before approval, a record was simply liability. Korath Prime, he said. He pressed a key, and the chamber's central display filled with data. A colonial world, human settled, 4th generation, population just under 4 million. The world sits at the intersection of 2 resource corridors the Velhari Dominion has been positioning toward for 11 years, Orath continued. Our economic modeling is clear. If the Dominion secures those corridors, our advantage in the outer belt markets collapses within 6 years, possibly 4. Then we negotiate, said Council Member Dara Voss. We have been negotiating for 3 years, Orath said. The Dominion's position has not moved. Silence. War Marshal Dreth Vale had been waiting for this moment. He was a broad, deliberate man who had spent 4 decades learning that silence, correctly timed, did more work than argument. He let the quiet hold for a count of 3 before he spoke. A simple seizure of the world creates a problem, he said. The humans will contest it. Legally, diplomatically, and eventually militarily. There will be insurgency, sabotage, decades of attrition. He paused. Unless there is no population left to contest it. The room went very quiet. Council Member Voss looked at him without blinking. You are proposing extermination. I am proposing resolution, Vale said. His tone did not change. His expression did not change. A world without humans cannot be reclaimed by humans. A world without humans has no insurgency, no decades of attrition. He looked around the table. We send a message that cannot be misread. Any human colonial world within the disputed corridors is subject to the same resolution. They withdraw from the corridor. We secure the resource lanes. The conflict ends before it becomes a war that costs all of us far more than one colony world. This is genocide, Voss said flatly. This is strategy, Vale replied. Orath looked at the display. At 4 million people reduced to a population density model, he thought about raising a specific concern, about an intelligence flag from 3 weeks ago. A UEF fleet designation that appeared nowhere in standard military registries. A report his staff had filed and he had not yet brought to the full council. He decided the concern could wait until after the vote. He was wrong about that. The motion passed 8-3. Operational codename, final correction. The Velhari Fleet, approach to Korath Prime. War Marshal Dreth Val stood on the bridge of the Dominion's fist as Korath Prime filled the forward viewport and felt the clean, uncomplicated satisfaction of a plan arriving at its execution phase without deviation. 60 warships. The full assembled weight of Velhari Dominion military power positioned on a timeline designed to leave the UEF with no opportunity to respond. His intelligence division had modeled the response windows carefully. The nearest human fleet capable of contesting this operation was 14 days out at maximum transit speed. His operation would be complete in 1, not 3 days, not the standard timeline for planetary suppression and occupation. 1 day, because they were not here to occupy. Orbital position in 12 minutes, War Marshal. His navigation officer said, all bombardment systems ready. Bunker penetrating ordnance loaded. Atmosphere displacement munitions standing by for ventilation delivery. The munitions were the key element. Conventional orbital bombardment would destroy surface infrastructure and kill anyone caught in the open, but Val had known from the beginning that a population with 18 hours of warning, or even 6, would go underground. Korath Prime's colonial emergency network was old, but extensive. The bunker complexes beneath every major settlement were built to survive orbital bombardment. They were not built to survive what was in his weapons bays. The atmosphere displacement munitions would work through the ventilation systems. His pre-positioned ground assets, intelligence operatives who had spent 11 months living among the colonists and mapping every air shaft and filtration access point, would open the ventilation infrastructure from the inside the moment the fleet achieved orbital position. It would be thorough. It would be complete. It would be fast. Sir, his long-range sensor operator's voice carried a quality that made Vale turn. Thermal imaging of the surface. The population centers. Sir, they're empty. Vale crossed to the station. The imaging was unmistakable. Korath Prime's cities read cold. Every settlement zone. Agricultural districts, industrial corridors, all of them showing the uniform thermal signature of evacuated structures. Not abandoned, not destroyed, simply vacated with enough lead time for the residual heat signatures to dissipate. Minimum 18 hours. The colonists had known they were coming and had gone underground. All of them. Val straightened. A lesser commander might have seen a problem. Dreth Vale saw an adjustment. Change of plan, he said. We don't need the orbital bombardment. There is nothing on the surface worth destroying. He turned to his tactical officer. The population is underground. My ground assets will open the ventilation access. But first I want boots on the ground to secure the exit points. All of them. Every bunker access shaft on this planet will have Velhari shock infantry standing on top of it before a single human being tries to come up. He paused. They went underground thinking the Earth would protect them. We're going to let them stay down there while we make sure it doesn't. Full deployment, War Marshal? Full deployment. All 50,000. I want this planet locked down from the surface before my assets go to work below it. No one comes up, no one escapes, no transmissions out. He looked at the cold, empty planet below him. They were clever enough to go underground. Make sure they understand that cleverness has limits. Yes, War Marshal. Drop sequencing will take approximately 40 minutes. Then begin. He turned back to the viewport. 4 million people in sealed bunkers beneath a quiet planet. Waiting. They had no idea what was coming for them from above. And they had no idea what was already waiting for them inside their own ventilation systems. Vale clasped his hands behind his back and watched the first wave of dropships begin their descent. He did not notice the sensor anomaly at the edge of the system. Not at first. The anomaly was small, a gravitational variance, a flicker in the long-range passive arrays that his sensor officer almost filed as instrument noise before the second reading came in, identical in character, 4 degrees removed from the first. Then a third. Then the passive arrays stopped being able to keep up with what they were registering and simply began producing alerts in a continuous stream. Each one represented an emergence event that carried no energy signature his systems recognized. No FTL bloom. No gravitational shear consistent with any drive technology in the Council's registry. Things were arriving in his system, not dropping out of FTL, appearing. War Marshal. His sensor officer's voice was careful in the way that voices get careful when the person speaking is trying to manage their own response to what they are seeing. I have multiple new contacts. Unknown configuration. They're not reading like anything in the registry. Drive signatures are absent. I have no FTL emergence data. They are simply... How many? A pause. 43, sir. And they're black. Val turned from the viewport. The tactical display showed them clearly. 43 contacts, arranged in a formation his computer spent 4 seconds attempting to classify before returning a result he had never seen from that system in 30 years of service. Unknown doctrine. They were black, not dark gray, not deep navy. Black in the way that weapon edges are black. Surfaces that consumed light rather than reflecting it. Running no lights. Broadcasting no transponder. Leaving no thermal signature in the space they occupied. They had appeared at the edge of the system without warning. They were now moving toward his fleet. Not fast. Deliberately. The way something moves when it is not concerned about what it is moving toward. "Open a channel," Vale said. He straightened his posture and spoke with the weight of 60 warships behind him. "Unknown vessels. This is War Marshal Dreth Val, commanding the Velhari Dominion battle fleet. You are entering an active operational zone under Council authority. You are ordered to withdraw immediately or be considered hostile. This is your only warning." A pause. The channel came back. The voice was flat, quiet. The voice of someone who has already finished the conversation they are currently in the middle of. "War Marshal. This is Commander Braxton, UEF Reaper Fleet. Be advised, you have been marked for deletion." The channel closed. The bridge was silent for a full second. Val had heard the name. Every senior officer in Council space had heard it. He had dismissed what he'd heard as inflated mythology. Disinformation. The kind of threat amplification that military intelligence services produced to shape the behavior of enemies who could be influenced by reputation. He looked at the 43 black ships moving toward him with the patient, unhurried purpose of something that had already decided how this ended. He thought about the word deletion. He thought about the specific confidence it implied. "All weapons free," he said. "Target the lead." The black ships moved. They did not move like warships. Vale had watched fleet engagements from command bridges across 4 decades. He knew how warships moved. The massive committed arcs, the way momentum was managed, the slow geometric argument of a fleet action unfolding across the void. These ships moved like water finding cracks in stone. They did not form an engagement line. They did not present broadsides. They flowed through the spaces between his ships, through gaps his formation geometry said did not exist, and they moved as if each one knew exactly where every other ship in the engagement would be 3 seconds from now. Because they did. The first strike erased his communications frigate, not crippled, erased. One moment, a blue icon on his display. The next, an expanding field of debris his sensors cataloged and dismissed. The second strike took his tactical coordination hub, a ship buried deep in his formation, surrounded by escorts whose position was classified above his own access level. A ship that no external registry named. A ship that should have been invisible to any sensor system outside his own command structure. The black ships had known exactly where it was. Third strike, fourth, fifth. Val watched the pattern emerge with the slow, nauseating comprehension of a man reading his own death sentence one word at a time. They were not attacking his ships. They were attacking his fleet's ability to function as a fleet. Every vessel they destroyed was a node, a connection, a thread in the web of coordination that turned 60 individual ships into a single fighting organism. They were not killing the body. They were severing the nervous system, cutting every pathway through which the fleet thought and communicated and responded. And they were doing it in an order that suggested they had mapped the entire web before the engagement began. "Evasive!" Vale started. The ship to his port side detonated. The shockwave rang through the Dominion's fist like a hammer on a bell. "Get me a targeting solution on..." His tactical officer looked up from his console. The expression on his face was something Vale had never seen on a trained combat officer. Lost. "War Marshal, they're not where our solutions say they are. By the time the computation finishes, they've already moved. I'm targeting positions they left 3 seconds ago. Vale looked at the display. 60 icons. 31. He watched the number drop to 24 while he was looking at it. All power to 16. 9. The Dominion's fist shuddered as something struck it amidships with the precision of a surgical instrument, not enough to destroy, enough to kill propulsion, enough to sever weapons capability, enough to leave life support and the bridge and communications alive and functioning, enough to leave Dreth Vale exactly where Commander Braxton wanted him. The last icon on his display winked out. His 60-ship fleet, gone in 4 minutes and 19 seconds. He stood on his crippled bridge in the silence of a man who had planned the extermination of 4 million people and found something had been waiting for him to try. The viewport showed him Korath Prime below, and his dropship still descending through the atmosphere. 50,000 of his soldiers, already committed, already falling, with no fleet left above them to support them and no way to call them back. Vol watched them go. He did not yet understand that he was being left alive to watch what came next. Korath Prime, the surface. The Velhari shock infantry hit the ground in coordinated waves. They were not conscripts. The Dominion did not use conscripts for planetary operations of this classification. These were Velhari shock infantry. 12 generations of genetic optimization for combat performance. Larger than baseline, faster, stronger, with reaction times that standard species could not match in direct engagement. Their armor was engineered to defeat the energy weapons that most spacefaring civilizations defaulted to when pressed, because the Dominion had learned over centuries that most civilizations fought in predictable ways with predictable tools. 50,000 of them. The full planetary assault complement. Every dropship committed simultaneously because Vale had seen no reason to hold anything in reserve against a colony world with no military garrison. They hit the surface across every settlement zone and found exactly what the orbital scans had shown. Nothing. Empty streets, empty buildings, silent infrastructure. A world that had been fully inhabited 12 hours ago and now gave back nothing but the ambient sounds of wind across empty structures and the distant settling of buildings whose climate systems were still running for no one. The shock infantry fanned out across the settlement zones and moved to their assigned positions. Every bunker access point, every emergency egress shaft, every ventilation structure they had been briefed on from the Dominion's 11 months of pre-operation intelligence work. They locked down the exits. They established fields of fire over every point through which a human being could attempt to surface. And then they waited for the ground assets to go to work. Shock Captain Vreth Tal had command of the northern district of the primary city. 4 bunker access points in his sector. 12 emergency egress shafts. His troops were in position on all of them within 20 minutes of landing, which was well within operational parameters. He had been on 9 planetary operations. He had never been on one this quiet. The silence had a quality to it that he couldn't fully name. It wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a place that knew something he didn't. He pushed the thought away. Operational focus. He keyed his command channel to check in with his flanking elements. Static. He tried again. Static. He looked up at the sky. The fleet was gone. Not gone the way a fleet goes when it moves out of orbital position. Gone the way a fleet goes when it stops existing. The orbital track above him showed nothing. No running lights, no drive signatures, no communications relay from the Dominion's fist on the standard command frequency. Just sky, and then something else. Small shapes in the upper atmosphere, descending, not the broad, blunt profiles of Velhari dropships. These were angular and narrow and wrong in a way that took him a moment to resolve into recognition. They were black, every single one of them. They were small, smaller than any troop carrier he had ever seen. Single occupant by the look of them. Not a squad transport, not a fire team insertion vehicle. 1 pod, 1 soldier, and there were hundreds of them. Vreth Tal had been on 9 planetary operations. He had never felt what he felt watching those black shapes come down. "All units," he said into his command channel, whatever was receiving it. Whoever could still hear him. "Weapons ready, incoming drop." The first pod hit the street at the end of his block. He didn't hear it land. He felt it. A pressure displacement. A wave moving through the ground and the air simultaneously, as if something very dense had arrived at very high speed and decided to stop exactly there. Steam bled from the pod's seams in long white ribbons, the only pale thing about it. The hatch opened. The armor was black, not painted, not finished, treated at some level below the surface so that it consumed light rather than bouncing it back, leaving the soldier wearing it as a shape defined by absence. A form you understood was there because of what it displaced rather than what it reflected. The exoskeleton underneath was visible only in the way it moved. The soldier's proportions were wrong for unaugmented biology, the reach too long, the stance too stable, the weight distribution suggesting something considerably denser than flesh and bone beneath the outer shell. When it moved with the specific character of a system operating well inside its performance limits, not straining, not pushing, simply executing. No joints were exposed, no seams. The helmet was a single continuous surface with a visor that showed Vreth Tal his own reflection. Small, armored, weapon raised, standing in an empty street on a world that had been quiet for 12 hours and was about to get significantly louder. He could not see what was behind that visor. He was not certain it mattered. He fired. His plasma repeater put out enough energy to melt structural steel at 40 meters. At 15 meters, it produced enough energy to end most armored infantry conversations immediately and permanently. The Reaper moved, not away from the shot, into a position adjacent to it. A shift of perhaps 40 centimeters, executed at a speed that made Vreth Tal's trained eyes submit a formal dispute to his conscious mind about whether it had happened, or whether the soldier had simply been standing somewhere else the entire time. The shot went past. He fired again. His squad opened up behind him. Full squad weapons fire converging on a single target at close range. The kind of fire concentration that ended things that needed ending. The Reaper was not where the fire converged. It moved through the incoming fire the way you move through a crowd when you know the crowd and the crowd doesn't know you. Not around it. Through it. Along lines that opened just ahead of each step, as if the geometry of the engagement had been calculated before the engagement began. It raised its weapon, not at Vreth Tal, at the soldier on Vreth Tal's left who was carrying the squad's heavy repeater, then the soldier on his right who was relaying their position to the next unit over, then the unit's communications specialist, then the second squad leader who had moved up to support. Vreth Tal watched it happen with the particular horror of a man who is being defeated not by overwhelming force, but by precision, who is watching something look at his formation and identify one by one the things that make it a formation rather than a collection of individuals and remove them. It was not fighting his squad, it was unmaking it. "Fall back," he started. The Reaper was in front of him. No transition. No visible crossing of the distance between them. One moment it was 6 meters away. The next it was close enough that he could see the reflection of his own face in that dark visor. Small. Scared. Holding a weapon it had already proven didn't work. Vreth Tal died without understanding how the distance had closed. Across Korath Prime, 500 stories began and ended in the span of the next 2 hours. Each Reaper operated independently. There was no coordination network to jam, no command channel to disrupt, no formation to break or encircle. Each soldier had been given their operational picture before deployment. A continuously updated map of every enemy position across their assigned zone, fed in real time from Reaper Fleet's sensor grid in orbit, painting the ground in perfect detail. They did not move to where the fighting was heaviest. They moved to where the fighting mattered most. 50,000 Velhari shock infantry had spread across Korath Prime in a tactically sound deployment, concentrated around the bunker access points, covering every exit, establishing interlocking fields of fire that would have been devastating against anyone trying to come up from underground. The Reapers were not coming up from underground, they were coming down from above. The Velhari deployment that had been designed to prevent escape became a deployment that was simply present, static, position committed, unable to maneuver or mass without exposing itself in ways that the Reaper's targeting systems processed the same way a chess program processes an opponent's mistake. The Reapers went for command nodes first, not by rank insignia, because those could be altered, by behavior, by the specific movement patterns of creatures making decisions rather than following them. The Reapers' training included a category of recognition that their program architects had described simply as reading the room. Decision-makers moved differently. They were always visible if you knew what you were looking for. The Reapers knew what they were looking for. They found the officers, then the communications infrastructure, then the heavy weapons crews, then the unit cohesion. The sergeants and squad leaders and veteran soldiers whose experience was the connective tissue that held 50,000 individuals into a functional fighting force. They removed the connective tissue. What remained was 50,000 soldiers who were still present, still armed, still capable of individual combat, but fighting alone. No coordination, no combined fire, no ability to mass or maneuver or respond collectively to a threat that was everywhere and nowhere and always seemed to know what they were going to do before they did it. Some units tried to concentrate. The Reapers anticipated this and were at the concentration points before the units arrived. Some units tried to disperse and find cover. The Reapers followed individual targeting assignments that did not require concentration to execute. Some units tried to breach the bunker exits, figuring that human hostages might create leverage, might force a pause, might give them something to negotiate with. The Reapers had been briefed on the bunker exit locations. Those units did not reach the exits. The shock infantry were elite, trained, genetically optimized. They did not break easily and they did not stop fighting when they should have, and they made the Reapers work for every meter of ground in every zone across the planet. It did not matter. The outcome had been calculated before the drop pods left the Harbinger's bays. It was simply a question of time. Aboard the Dominion's Fist. Drifting. Dreth Vale watched it happen from orbit. His tactical display was still functioning. His sensors were still functioning. His communications systems were still functioning. Reaper Fleet had been very specific about what they destroyed on the Dominion's Fist and what they left intact, and the calculus of that specificity became clearer to Vale with every passing minute. They wanted him to see. The surface overlay showed him everything. 500 contact signatures moving through 53 settlement zones across his planet. His planet, the world that Final Correction was going to deliver to the Dominion as proof of concept, as message, as the first step in a strategy that would reshape the corridor's political geography for generations. He watched each contact signature move through its assigned zone. He watched the Velhari unit indicators go dark, not in clusters, not in the way units go dark when they break and run, one by one, systematically, in an order that, once he recognized the pattern, told him something he did not want to know about what he was watching. They were working through a list. His 50,000 soldiers, the finest ground combat force the Velhari Dominion could put on a planetary surface, were a list that something was working through. Methodically, without hurry. He tried his communications array. Reaper Fleet's jamming was selective. Internal ship communications worked, but no signal could reach the surface. His soldiers were fighting blind, no orbital support, no coordination from above, no knowledge that the fleet above them no longer existed, and no relief was coming. They were fighting because soldiers fight, and they were dying because something had decided they would. Vol stood at his tactical display for 2 hours and watched his army disappear. He did not look away. He was not sure he could. The last organized Velhari unit on Korath Prime was a concentration of approximately 400 soldiers who had managed to hold a defensive perimeter in the industrial district of the primary city. They had done everything right, consolidated their remaining heavy weapons, established overlapping fire coverage, put their backs to a hardened structure, and refused to be dislodged. It had bought them 90 minutes. In the final accounting, that was the most effective resistance of the entire engagement. 90 minutes. When the Reapers came for that last perimeter, they did not come from one direction. They came from every direction simultaneously at a moment of the Reapers' choosing, with a coordination that required no communication network because the coordination had been built into the assignment before the soldiers hit the ground. The perimeter lasted 4 minutes. Then Korath Prime was quiet again. A different kind of quiet than the quiet of 12 hours ago. Not the quiet of an evacuated world waiting to see what came next. The quiet of a finished thing. Commander Braxton opened the channel to the Dominion's fist. "War Marshal." Val's voice came back, controlled. The voice of a man using the last of his professional discipline to hold a shape that had been hollowed out. "Commander Braxton." "You have a functioning communications array," Braxton said. "You have a functioning sensor suite. You have seen everything that occurred on that surface in the past 2 hours." A pause. "Yes," Vale said. "Then you understand the full scope of what final correction produced." Another pause. Longer. "Yes," Vale said. "I am going to give you one task, War Marshal. You will open a channel to Council Command. You will transmit a full after-action report. Everything your sensors recorded from the moment your fleet achieved orbital position to this moment. The fleet engagement, the ground operation, all of it." Braxton's voice did not change, did not rise or harden. It had the flat, complete quality of a thing that has already been decided. Everything the Council authorized, everything they sent you here to do, and everything that happened when they sent you here to do it. You will transmit that report in its entirety, without omission, and you will ensure the Council understands that this is what the execution of their policy produced. Val was quiet for a moment. "And after I transmit," he said. He already knew the answer. He had known it since he understood why his life support had been left running. "Transmit the report, War Marshal," Braxton said. The channel from the Dominion's fist went to the standard work of compiling a sensor record, timestamps, engagement data, tactical overlays, the full visual and signals record of everything the Dominion's fist had observed from orbital position above Korath Prime. It took 11 minutes to compile. Val reviewed it once. He did not edit it. He transmitted it to Council Command with a header that read, in the formal notation of a senior Velhari military officer, filing an operational report. Final correction. Complete engagement record. War Marshal Dreth Val, for Council review. He watched the transmission complete. He looked out his viewport at Korath Prime one last time. Still there. Amber plains, purple mountains, the debris of his 60 ships burning in long, slow arcs across the upper atmosphere. Intact, occupied, human. He set down his command stylus. "Transmission complete," he said. "Confirmed," Braxton said. A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. "Thank you, War Marshal." The Dominion's fist ceased to exist 30 seconds later. The Council received the transmission. Every member of the Senior Council who had voted for final correction watched the full sensor record of what Dreth Vale had transmitted. They watched their 60-ship fleet reduced to orbital debris in 4 minutes and 19 seconds. They watched 50,000 of the Dominion's finest soldiers processed across the surface of Korath Prime over the course of 2 hours, by 500 soldiers in black armor and exoskeletons who had not once requested support, not once broken their operational tempo, not once deviated from a course of action that had clearly been decided before the first pod left the launch bay. They watched the final transmission from Dreth Val. They watched the sensor record end. The chamber was silent for a long time. Then Braxton's voice came through the Council's emergency channel. No request, no protocol, just present, the way the black ships had been present. Not arrived, simply there. Council, no one spoke. You authorized the extermination of 4 million civilians. You armed a fleet with atmosphere displacement munitions designed to kill people in sealed underground shelters. You placed intelligence assets inside a human colony for 11 months with explicit instructions to open those shelters from the inside at the moment of the attack. He paused. I want the Council to understand something clearly. We know the names of every person in that chamber who voted for final correction. We know the names of every officer, every planner, every logistics coordinator who touched that operational file. We know the name of every intelligence asset who spent 11 months on Korath Prime. Another pause. The population of Korath Prime is alive. Their world is intact. It will remain both. That is not a negotiating position. That is a fact. The silence on the Council channel had a different quality now. The silence of people who have just understood something about the nature of the conversation they are in. What do you want from us? Council Arbiter Orath's voice, the closest thing to a steady voice in the room. What does Reaper Fleet want? Braxton's answer came without hesitation. We want you to remember what you watched in that sensor record, he said. We want you to play it again in the next Council session, when someone brings a proposal that involves a human world. We want the word deletion to mean something specific to every person in that chamber for the rest of their careers. A pause. And we want to be clear about what happens the next time a fleet with Council authorization approaches a human colonial world with extermination as its operational objective. Orath's voice was careful. Which is? You will see black ships in your sky, Braxton said. And the last sound you hear before the engagement begins will be the same sound Dreth Val heard. Silence. That we will be marked for deletion, Orath said quietly. Correct, Braxton said. And then, Braxton said, it goes exactly the way it went today. He closed the channel. The black ships did not linger. There were no ceremonies, no formal declarations, no diplomatic exchanges or carefully worded statements for the interstellar record. Reaper Fleet had not come to Korath Prime to make a statement. They had come because someone was in the bunkers. The work was done. The Harbinger's launch bays received the last of the drop pods. 500 Reapers walked off their ships and through the fleet's corridors and went back to whatever waiting looked like for people built the way they were built. No decompression, no ceremony, no collective pause to mark the wait of the last 2 hours. They went in and they came out, and the going and the coming were indistinguishable in how they carried themselves. Tools returned to drawers, ready for the next time they were needed. On the surface of Korath Prime, the bunker indicators went green. The doors opened. 4 million people came up out of the earth into ash-filtered light and found their world intact and the sky empty of everything except the slow-burning arcs of Velhari debris crossing the upper atmosphere. They did not know the specific details of what had happened above them and around them while they were underground. Not yet. They would learn. And somewhere in the outer dark, running no lights and broadcasting no signal, leaving no thermal ghost and no sensor trace, 43 black ships turned toward the next place they might be needed. Already moving, already watching, as always.
If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of humanity rising among the stars, please like, comment, and subscribe. New stories are released regularly here on Empyrean Chronicles.